Thanks for joining. We are about to start another OTT. Today's topic is about UX audit. So, what is the UX audit? Sorry, it's basically a quality assurance process, right? So, in this process is where we can review the product, whichever it is, to ensure that it's meeting business needs, the user experience that is expected, if it is meeting the accessibility requirements. And in this process of UX audit, we can identify all the possible pain points that this product might have, right? So when can or should we apply the UX audit? Whenever the company thinks the product isn't performing the way it should, right? Like when the growing has stopped, or maybe like after a few features releases, or when it isn't behaving or performing the way it is expected. Because it's very common, for example, for companies to do releases and keep doing it without really taking consideration this part of UX audit, right? Because actually UX audit is an internal process that every designer should do before releasing any feature, right? But it's very common for some point of the roadmap, they just keep releasing features, and then the product kind of gets lost, right? Or sometimes the feature doesn't reach the expected about it. And then it's the perfect time to do it. Once you think, or the company thinks the product is not behaving the way it should, right? As I mentioned, it's an internal process. And because of that, you can do it with an internal designer, an in-house designer. But the thing is that ideally you should hire an external designer, because this way your analysis is going to be non-biased, right? You won't have any constraints about or restrictions like, oh, I don't think my boss is going to like what I have to say, or things like that. And then when you hire an external company like us, right, you can have a complete analysis and a very sincere and honest analysis about how the product is going, right? Here I'm going to explain the topics that are usually analyzed in a UX audit. The material depends on what the company is willing to offer, because we can do an analysis just with screenshots, for example, but it won't be a complete analysis, right? Ideally, the auditor should have access to the platform, the app. It should be allowed to access it either from the user perspective, or maybe some manager perspective, if it is the case, right? So we can analyze not only how it looks and some UI aspects, but also some interactions and how the product behaves. Also, if possible, if the company has this access, it's also ideal to have analysis, analytics, and any kinds of demographics that it might be available, right? So the design system part is where we can analyze if different components have the same function or vice versa. And we analyze the spacing, the lettering, the colors, if everything is consistently applied. Sometimes it might be a mistake of the implementation. Sometimes it can be a mistake from the designer. Sometimes the day-to-day pressure makes these things happen. And so it's important to keep that in mind. And in this way, we can point if it's something that it shouldn't be placed there. It might sometimes mix some of the categories I'm going to present here, but basically is that. Design system analysis is that, or maybe one thing that might fall in this category is when, for example, there is an image in the place of the button, or there is misplaced. Here's where it falls, right? layout and hierarchy. Like I mentioned, if you have only pictures, you can do a design system analysis, but you can't do, for example, flows, navigations, feedback. It's where what we analyze in this part. So any problems or information architecture falls here as well, right? And if there is something that's misplaced, or maybe like when something doesn't have the correct hierarchy, or the image, or it's not the image, the content is placed in a way that's not delivering the ideal message, here's where it falls. Accessibility issues is a big part of it, because usually in the UX audits that we do, it's something that always shows up, like the color contrast is not enough, the font scaling is not being applied when you change your browser configurations, or when you try to use a screen reader or tab navigation, the hierarchy of the components are placed in a way that's not fluid enough. So this is the category it falls to. We have another OTT about accessibility. If you want to know more about this topic, search in our YouTube, you will find this topic there. The heuristics is a big part of UX audit, because they are 10 general principles that Jacob Nielsen did for principles of design interaction. And it's a way to base your analysis, and it's a nice way to categorize. This is what we do in our analysis to make the clients and the stakeholders understand where they are missing things, right? So we categorize our discoveries in these 10 principles. Of course, when we do the analysis, we consider everything that I mentioned so far, and plus some other items. But this part is where we can point and visually show where the mistakes are, right? So yeah, analyzing according to the heuristics is a good step, because also it prevents you to miss any topic. Like if you're taking a look at the feedback, but you forget about um, help and assistance, for example, the heuristics will recall you to the usability problems. Of course, the whole analysis is made in a user-centric manner, right? But if, like I mentioned, some features are not right for the product, or maybe are not implemented in a way that makes sense for the product, that's where it falls and it enters in this category. So here, as I mentioned, if the auditor has access to data analysis or any kind of performance of the application, it's better in this case, right? Also, if possible, the auditor can ask for user testing or some internal testings to analyze this part, right? But it all comes down to any other aspects like I'm going to mention furthermore. And UX writing also is a great topic, and this is the our topic. So if the product has different speech tones, or maybe when you have an error message and that red or error with code pops up in your face, or the action you do for a button is the same action but with different wording, like one button is next, the other button is done, the other button is submit, and they all mean the same thing. This is where we classify these problems, right? So anything that it's related to the copy or the text that is not according to the ideal falls here. Issue constraints, right? The audit constraints. It's an important part in the mean that the auditors must understand the budget, what is available, what is the deadline, because this way we can measure better what we should do and how long do we have to make this analysis. Because if you have a lot of time and a big budget, you can hire more auditors, you can have more people analyzing, as I mentioned, you can have some user testings in between, everything that might help. It's where we analyze the constraints, right? But of course, usually the companies want to have a lean process. So usually it's one person with, I don't know, a few days to analyze. And depends also on the size of the project. But this is the part where we understand the scope and how long can we do it. So we can focus on the most important parts. And about the report is very important because it's where we will deliver the report of the UX audit. Will be a reliable source of information because that's where the decision making person is going to take a look to make decisions, right? So the report must be in a way that everybody can understand and have a correct balance of technicities and some comprehensive language. And, the correct balance for this part is crucial. Usually in our reports, we do a presentation beside not, usually it's not a long text, something that's too dense on text, because this way it's hard to digest this information. For example, this is how we show our report. As I mentioned, we categorize things according to heuristics, taking in account all the things that I mentioned before, but we categorize the heuristics and we explain topic by topic what is wrong, what is right, what's important to consider, and so on. So this is part of one real life auditions that we did here at Python. And some tips for success are be organized. It's very easy to get lost because there is a lot of information you need to analyze, a lot of things you can take notes. For example, you might have a little mistake that falls into multiple categories and you have a lot of considerations to do. So take notes and be organized about everything so you don't get lost. And don't forget to mention it in your report. Don't only highlight the wrongs, also highlight what is right, because this way it might be a lighthouse for where things should go. Because sometimes when you only highlight the wrong, it feels like everything is wrong, and life is not like that, right? There's always something that's right, always something that's wrong. So finding a balance between that is nice. Also, for when the client is looking at that, he will understand also which path to go on, right? Be specific. Mention, take notes, and be or like this part here should do this, should do that, and not being too broad. Otherwise, the analysis will look like ChatGPT make it, right? And you don't want that. So be specific, be concise, and be technical as well, so it's more reliable, right? And suggest improvements. That's also a part that is important, because this way your client will know what steps they should do next. Again, don't be too broad. Don't so this way people can know what to do later, right? And that's it. Any questions about what we have seen so far? Of course, UX audit is a very long process to learn how to do it, but once you do it, it feels like a child's play. It's not in a way that's easy, but because it's already inside your mind and you already know which steps you should do, like riding a bicycle.
I had a question.
Yes,
When do you think companies are more likely to look for a service of UX audit? Is it when they are having lots of issues, or do you think they also do in preparation to some big event or to an improvement?
ideally it should be before launching the project for a broad audience, right? That's the ideal world. But usually they ask for UX audit when things are going wrong, like this product is not performing the way it should, I know that something wrong and I just don't know what is it. I think it's a very powerful tool. It's great.
Yeah, it's like a doctor. You should take care of your health and you should exercise before you're sick,
Yeah.
but then they do when they're sick. It's less impactful, maybe.
Yes. That's the a great example. It's the same way. It should be done before you get sick, but usually you go to a doctor after you get sick and you don't know what to do about it. Right.
Makes
That's
sense.
okay. That's it. Thank you for your attention. Hope to see you in the next OTT about UX design. Thank you.